What you see is disturbing real-life footage of vigilante justice against a French tourist, tortured and murdered by a Madagascar mob. Before we go further, a word of caution. This video contains graphic details unsuitable for some viewers, which is understandable. I was horrified seeing this raw footage, despite covering many brutal cases before. This one hit differently. So if you're uncomfortable with extreme violence, this is your moment to step away. Everything starts on this beach. Everything leads back to it. Looping like a nightmare. The child's body returned by the sea, the lynching, the men burned alive, the cries of joy. Everything begins and ends on this Madagascar beach, where the grief of a child was transformed by the poison of rumor into a collective fury that would lead 3 men to end their days at the stake. It all started after 8-year-old Chaïno went missing from Ambatoloaka, a seaside village on Nosy Be Island off Madagascar's northwest coast when he was returning from the mosque. Nosy Be, an idyllic island in the Indian Ocean, is known for pristine white beaches and turquoise waters, Madagascar's main tourist magnet attracting visitors worldwide. Its capital is Hellville, a name that would prove grimly prophetic. However, behind Nosy Be's beautiful scenery lies a seedy underbelly. The island is notorious as a hotbed of sex tourism. Mob justice runs rampant here and across Madagascar as authorities struggle to maintain order. Nosy Be exists within an extremely poor place where crushing poverty fuels disturbing cycles like child prostitution, making the issue of pedophilia especially volatile. Chaïno vanished on September 27, 2013. After scouring nearby areas, his father Luciano went to the police, filing a kidnapping complaint that authorities barely acknowledged. Facing official indifference, the family understood they'd have to investigate alone. For 7 agonizing days, Luciano and neighbors combed every corner of Ambatoloaka, but found nothing. The search yielded only empty hands and heavier hearts. Luciano's suspicion turned to his own cousin, Zaido, Chaïno's uncle, and a man with whom he'd fought a bitter land dispute. A dispute Luciano had won. Now, that victory tasted like ashes. Convinced this was Zaido's revenge, Luciano saw clues everywhere. The man's shady reputation as a beach hustler catering to tourists, his disturbing lack of interest in finding his missing nephew. The family acted. They stormed Zaido's home, bound his wrists, and dragged him toward Hellville's police station, all without a shred of real evidence. Just grief, rage, and the terrible arithmetic of suspicion. On October 2nd, as Nosy Be's police and gendarmerie chiefs, military police overseeing civilians, prepared for candidate Harry Rajaonarimampianina's election rally in Hellville during this tense pre-election period, they made a fateful decision. Overwhelmed by crowds and prioritizing political stability after years of crisis, authorities dismissed Zaido's case as a family affair, releasing him to Chaïno's relatives despite the growing mob outside. Police Commissioner Honoya Tilahizandri would later explain their inaction by citing crowd control concerns for the upcoming rally. The moment Zaido emerged from the station, the waiting crowd erupted, pelting him with stones until gendarmes and family members bundled him into a vehicle that sped away to an undisclosed location, all while the hail of projectiles continued. Later that same October 2nd, a chilling rumor tore through Hellville. A cooler allegedly containing children's body parts had been discovered at the port. The enraged mob, now convinced Zaido was hiding at the gendarmerie compound, descended upon the building in a fury, torching a military truck and ransacking 13 gendarme residences. When security forces responded, first with tear gas, then live rounds, the confrontation left 2 dead and 10 wounded. What began as another day of Nosy Be's simmering tensions erupted into unprecedented chaos. The violence spiraling beyond control as authorities stood by, making no meaningful attempt to intervene or restore order to the escalating carnage. At 11 p.m. that same horrific day, Chaïno's small, broken body washed ashore on Ambatolaca Beach, waterlogged yet mutilated beyond recognition, his genitals and tongue missing, intestines exposed, flesh savagely torn. The sight shattered Luciano completely, his anguished grief igniting the already volatile crowd who had spent days scouring the island for the boy they'd hoped to find alive. The brutal state of the corpse, far beyond mere drowning, sparked terrifying theories among the villagers. Dark whispers of organ harvesting, ritual killings, foreign predators at work in their community. What began as a missing child case had now become something far more sinister in the eyes of the devastated father and the enraged mob. A deep-rooted belief haunts Madagascar that human organs are stolen for witchcraft rituals, with outsiders often blamed. When Chaïno's pale, mutilated body was found, locals shouted, "The corpse was frozen. It's completely white." Seeing this as proof of organ theft. The tragedy also took a darker turn, with suspicions of pedophilic predators at work. Nosy Be, while being Madagascar's premier tourist destination, struggles with rampant sex tourism. Here, extreme poverty has fueled child prostitution to alarming levels, so severe that the UN in 2013 condemned its normalization across the country. The intersection of these grim realities, superstition about organ harvesting, sex tourism scars, and systemic child exploitation, created a powder keg of suspicion and rage after Chaïno's death. Sébastien Judalet, a 38-year-old French bus driver from Montreux, Paris, lived an ordinary life until tragedy struck. A devoted father to his 11-year-old daughter, colleagues and neighbors remembered him as mild-mannered and friendly, with one neighbor describing him as extremely kind. Madagascar held a special place in his heart. A former partner revealed how he loved everything about it, fearing he might never return after first visiting years earlier with his then-girlfriend. By September 2013, newly single, Sébastien embarked on another solo trip, arriving in Nosy Be on the 15th with a 60-day tourist visa. He checked into the modest Hotel Robinson Crusoe, unaware this holiday would be his last. In Nosy Be, Sébastien befriended Roberto Gianfalla, a Franco-Italian drifter originally from Palermo, Sicily. Those who knew him in Italy recalled a rootless existence, separated from the mother of his 2 children years earlier, bouncing between menial jobs he couldn't hold down. A brief stint at a pizzeria lasted barely a month before he quit, deeming the work too demanding. He scraped by in a crumbling house, relying on handouts from a local jeweler and his son who provided food, clothing, and even a small gas stove. Before leaving for Madagascar, Roberto messaged the jeweler's son on Facebook, announcing his move to what he'd later call paradise. Upon arrival, Roberto embraced island life with wide-eyed wonder, scribbling in his diary, "I think I have arrived in paradise." He became obsessed with precious stones, particularly star sapphires, while staying at a mining concession near Ambanja, owned by his childhood friend Thierry Wins. His days settled into a rhythm of beachcombing and gem hunting, a far cry from the struggles he'd left behind in Palermo. Sébastien Judalet first encountered Zaidu on the beaches of Nosy Be, where the local man became something of an informal guide and helper. Sébastien later introduced Zaidu to Roberto Gianfalla, and soon the three developed a regular social connection, meeting frequently, forming what appeared to be a harmless friendship. But this casual bond would prove deadly. When Chaïno's mutilated body was discovered on October 2nd, the island's simmering tensions exploded. The grieving, furious crowd became convinced Zaidu had abducted the boy for foreigners, either homosexual pedophiles or organ traffickers. And when villagers learned Zaidu had been regularly visiting Sébastien and Roberto, their suspicion hardened into certainty. In the mob's eyes, Zaidu must have kidnapped Chaïno for these Westerners, the presumed masterminds of this imagined trafficking ring. With Zaidu hidden away by authorities, the crowd's rage needed a new target, and Sébastien became the obvious scapegoat. In the pre-dawn hours of October 3rd, 2013, around 3 a.m., a violent mob stormed the Hotel Robinson Crusoe, dragging a half-asleep Sébastien Judalet to the terrace for a brutal interrogation.
Tout ce que tu connais dans cette histoire, tu nous racontes. Sinon, on te laisse devant tout le monde, tu vas te faire tuer. Hein.
J'ai bien compris, madame.
C'est pas sexuel,
Non, je ne suis pas homosexuel, madame. Je n'aime pas les enfants, surtout pas, et je n'aime pas les personnes qui ont des rapports sexuels avec les enfants.
Tu dis que tu n'aimes pas les enfants.
Je dis, je n'aime pas les gens qui font du mal aux enfants.
Leading the questioning was Louisa, a prominent local businesswoman who took on the role of improvised prosecutor. She grilled him about his sexuality and alleged attraction to children, often twisting his responses through deliberate mistranslation. Another interrogator, a man whose identity remains unclear, focused on rumors of child abductions, threatening to abandon Sébastien to the bloodthirsty crowd unless he confessed. The terrace became a courtroom without rules, where truth mattered less than satisfying the mob's hunger for blame. A surreal mock trial unfolded for nearly an hour, partially captured on video by Sébastien's tormentors, where he faced relentless accusations of pedophilia. The Frenchman desperately pleaded innocence, his voice cracking as he insisted he was trapped in some conspiracy, declaring, "I hate child molesters," while invoking his own young daughter as proof of his character. Meanwhile, hotel director Joël Hoching made 7 frantic calls to police as the grotesque spectacle continued. Each ring met with lethal silence. No squad cars arrived, no officers intervened, just the growing certainty that this trial had only one possible verdict. At 3:40 a.m., as the first light of dawn threatened to break ring, a second mob descended on Roberto Gianfalla's hut near Thierry Wynn's mining concession, dragging him half-conscious from sleep. Like Sébastien, he was stripped naked, his confusion mirroring his friend's terror as they were marched toward Ambatolouaka Beach, the very stretch of sand where Chaïno's mutilated body had been discovered hours earlier. Neither man fully grasped the nightmare unfolding around them, the accusations, the rage, the predetermined fate closing in with each step toward the shore. The beach that had once symbolized paradise for Roberto now loomed as a site of grotesque reckoning. The beach became a house of horrors. Despite 2 gendarmerie officers standing by, useless as props, Sébastien and Roberto endured tortures beyond comprehension. The mob's frenzy only grew after the initial interrogations, with security sources later admitting the Europeans were systematically broken into confessing. Sticks and stones rained down on Sébastien's body as the crowd demanded admissions of child murder, of organ trafficking. And in their agony, both men uttered whatever would make the pain stop, not knowing their coerced words were death warrants. The mob had rules: confess first, die after. Perhaps in their final moments, Sébastien and Roberto understood this grotesque bargain, that the quick release of death might be preferable to prolonged butchery. So they confessed, and the crowd obliged. The mob, drunk on their forced confessions, escalated the violence with singular purpose: death. As the executioner theatrically called out, "Goodbye, world," Sébastien, naked, a tire cinched around his bleeding waist, twisted in the sand, attempting to rise before logs shattered his body for the last time. They mutilated his corpse before tossing it onto a pyre, blanketing it with ravanala leaves like some grotesque ritual. Roberto, barely conscious with his face pulped from blows, left a blood trail as they dragged him by his ankles toward the flames, heaving him onto Sébastien's burning remains. Cell phones captured it all: the 100-strong crowd, the uniformed armed observer, the applause as fire consumed flesh at dawn on October 3rd. 9,000 kilometers from home, 2 men died not for crimes they committed, but for a collective delusion that turned vacationers into monsters. The footage survives, not evidence, but trophies of a morning when madness wore the mask of justice. That afternoon, the mob completed its grim tally. Zaidu, Chaïno's uncle, was spotted driving across the island, prompting hundreds to swarm him. They dragged him to a public street beside a mosque and burned him alive. By evening, police finally stirred, arresting 14 suspects linked to the lynchings or attacks on gendarme homes. Authorities slapped a curfew on Nosy Be, and within 2 days, 26 more arrests followed as security forces patrolled the unnaturally calm streets. The news ricocheted across Europe. France and Italy reeled as their consulates confirmed the horrific deaths, warning remaining citizens on Nosy Be to stay indoors after dark. France issued a blunt travel advisory: avoid the island entirely until order returned. Meanwhile, in a Paris investigative office, French police quietly opened a murder file for Sébastien Judalet, a procedural gesture that couldn't undo what the mob had done. The investigation revealed a devastating truth. Sébastien Judalet had no history, no evidence whatsoever, linking him to sex crimes or organ trafficking. French authorities formally cleared his name of all pedophilia suspicions, confirming what the mob had refused to believe. There was zero proof connecting him, Roberto, or even Zaidu, to Chaïno's death. To this day, the boy's murder remains unsolved. No suspects charged, no circumstances clarified. While French diplomatic sources floated theories about Chaïno potentially falling victim to Nosy Be's underground pedophile rings, Malagasy investigators never established any actual link between the child and the three men burned alive in that frenzy of misplaced vengeance. The real killer, if there was one beyond the sea itself, walked free, while innocent blood stained the sand. September 2015. The long-delayed trial of 37 suspects finally opened in Antananarivo's courthouse. 35 civilians and 2 policemen facing charges ranging from murder to dereliction of duty. Not one entered a guilty plea. Inside the courtroom, grainy videos of the lynchings played as witnesses and defendants spun conflicting accounts. One man admitted to helping burn the Westerners alive. Another confessed to transporting a victim in his cart, though he insisted fear of the mob left him no choice. The proceedings grew heated when prosecutors pressed charges against the 2 officers, their defense lawyer arguing they'd done all they could, while shifting blame onto absent local officials. The trial even stalled when those same officers failed to appear, underscoring the systemic dysfunction that had allowed the murders to happen. The trial uncovered darker currents swirling beneath the mob violence. Testimony revealed a targeted conspiracy against Thierry Wins, the French gem prospector and Roberto's associate. Under interrogation, both Sébastien and Roberto had named Thierry and a jeweler called Fred as guarantors of their morality, unknowingly painting targets on their backs. Thierry himself testified, "I was warned we were causing a nuisance. Joseph Yolande wanted my mining shares. He would have loved to eliminate us." The accusation landed like a grenade. Yolande, a local senator, stood accused of renting protesters and using his radio station to incite violence against expats the night of the lynchings. The pieces fit too neatly. Yolande's rumored coveting of Thierry's business, the sudden appearance of armed men near his property after Sébastien and Roberto invoked his name. What began as vigilante justice now reeked of political opportunism, xenophobia weaponized to settle commercial scores. Thierry Wins recounted his own brush with the mob in chilling detail. The crowd wanted to cremate him without further ado. His survival strategy? A desperate performance, switching to Malagasy, hurling insults at Sébastien and Roberto, even striking Judalet while accusing him of organ trafficking. Every action reeked of calculated self-preservation. A man throwing others to the wolves to save his own skin that day. The confession, wrapped in justification, exposed the ugly calculus of survival under the mob's gaze. October 9th, 2015. The gavel finally fell. 4 men received Madagascar's harshest punishment, life at hard labor, the maximum sentence in a nation that had abolished the death penalty. 5 others faced shorter prison terms ranging from 3 months to 6 years, while 1 defendant drew a 7-year sentence. In a sweeping dismissal, 25 walked free, deemed doubtful by the court, alongside 1 fully acquitted gendarme. The 2 police officers' fates split. One released without consequence, the other handed a mere 6-month sentence. Justice, in the end, proved as uneven as the violence it sought to address. Sébastien's body was finally brought home, undergoing forensic examination in Evry before his grieving parents could lay him to rest. But closure remained elusive. In 2015, unsatisfied with Madagascar's trial, they filed a formal complaint with France's Bobigny court, demanding a real investigation, true justice for their murdered son. The Bobigny prosecutor's character inquiry officially exonerated Sébastien, dismantling the vile pedophilia and organ trafficking lies that had doomed him. Yet the family's ordeal continued when their lawyer discovered the Bobigny court had lost Sébastien's case file, another cruel twist in their agonizing fight for accountability. Each step forward seemed met with institutional indifference, as if the system itself kept whispering, "Let it go." And so, it all wrapped up on that Nosy Be beach, a paradise turned graveyard, where grief and rumors sparked a fire that swallowed Sébastien, Roberto, and Chaïno whole. The courts handed down sentences, sure, locked some away for life, but Chaïno's death? That stayed a shadow, unsolved. No one held to account for the little boy lost. Sébastien's parents still chase justice, fighting through lost files and faded hope, while the island tries to shake off the stain, luring tourists back to its sands. It's a brutal tale, one that leaves you wondering, was this just rage run wild, or a deeper wound we'll never fully see? Drop your thoughts below. Now, I dig into true crime every week, unearthing cases like this that stick with you. If that's your kind of thing, hit subscribe, it helps a ton. Thanks for watching.